The golden age of muscle cars gave us raw speed, roaring engines, and zero mercy, but it also came with a deadly price. These 10 beasts were brutally fast, hard to control, and unforgiving for anyone who pushed them too far. Together, they claimed over 4,000 lives, earning their place as the most dangerous legends ever to hit American roads.
Hit that subscribe button. Your subscription is the fuel for the next video.
Number 10. The 1971 Buick GSX Stage 1. Now, when most folks hear Buick, they think of grandpas in plaid shorts cruising to bingo night. But this was no golf cart with a hood ornament. The GSX Stage 1 was a fire-breathing, tire-melting beast in Sunday clothes, the automotive equivalent of a librarian who secretly moonlights as a heavyweight boxer. See, Buick wasn't really known for being the wild child of GM's family. Chevy had the flashy Camaros, Pontiac had the rebel Firebirds and GTOs, and Oldsmobile was doing its own thing with the 442. Buick? They were the doctor's car, respectable, plush, sophisticated. Then some mad scientist in Flint said, "Hey, what if we built something that looks like a Buick but hits like a freight train?" And boom, the GSX Stage 1 was born. Now here's the kicker. The heart of this monster wasn't some high-revving small block begging to be redlined. Nope, Buick stuffed in a 455 cubic inch V8, one of the biggest brutes of its day. And while other engines made their power by screaming at 6,500 RPM, the Buick Stage 1 was like, nah, we'll do it my way. This thing made torque so low in the rev range you could sneeze on the gas pedal and roast the tires. We're talking about 510 pound-feet of torque. That's not just muscle, that's earthquake levels of twist. And let me tell you something, that torque didn't care if you were ready. You so much as looked at the throttle wrong, and suddenly you were sideways, praying you didn't end up in your neighbor's front yard. This was a car that humbled cocky drivers real quick. You had to respect it, or it'd slap you around like a bouncer tossing drunks out of a dive bar. Now, Buick dressed it up with some flair too. The GSX wasn't just a sleeper. It had stripes, spoilers, and bright paint jobs like Saturn Yellow and Apollo White. It screamed, "Yes, I'm a Buick, but don't you dare laugh at me." And the Stage 1 option? That was the secret sauce. Better heads, hotter cam, higher compression, a monster carb. It basically turned an already strong GSX into a street brawler that could embarrass plenty of Mopars and Chevys at the stoplight Grand Prix. The funniest part? Buick advertised it as the gentleman's hot rod. And yeah, I guess it was, if by gentleman you mean a guy who wears a suit while doing burnouts in front of the country club. But let's be real, there was nothing polite about a GSX Stage 1 launching off the line. It was all noise, smoke, and fury, the kind of thing that made cops reach for their ticket book before you even shifted into second. But 1971 was also when the party lights started flickering. Insurance companies were cracking down, emissions rules were creeping in, and the muscle car era was hitting its hangover phase. The GSX still delivered brutal performance, but you had to fight the system just to keep these things alive on the street. They were already rare back then, and today they're unicorns with price tags that'll make your jaw hit the floor. Bottom line, the 1971 Buick GSX was torque on wheels. It didn't care if you were Mario Andretti or some kid with a fresh license. You made one mistake, and that 455 would chew you up and spit you into the guardrail. Respect was mandatory. Handle it right, though, and you weren't just driving a Buick. You were driving one of the greatest muscle car legends of all time. Number 9. The 1969 AMC AMX 390. Now there's a car that proves sometimes the underdog packs the nastiest bite. Let's be real. When folks rattle off muscle car legends, they go straight for Mustangs, Camaros, Cudas, GTOs, the big dogs that hog the spotlight. AMC? Man, half the population thought that stood for Ain't My Car. But those folks clearly never met the AMX 390, A short-wheelbase psycho rocket that could rip your face off and spin you into a ditch before you even realized what gear you were in. So here's the setup. AMC decided they were tired of being the nerdy kid in the back row while Chevy and Ford got all the prom dates. They wanted a muscle car, but not just another pony car clone. Enter the AMX, basically a two-seat, chopped wheelbase javelin with an attitude problem. Then AMC dropped their biggest brawler under the hood, a 390 cubic inch V8 pushing out a healthy 315 horsepower. Doesn't sound insane by today's standards, but remember, this thing was tiny compared to its rivals. It weighed less, had less wheelbase, and all that grunt was packed into a car that handled like a caffeinated squirrel. And here's where it gets fun and terrifying. With a wheelbase shorter than most people's attention spans, the AMX didn't exactly do stable. You stomp on that gas and the back end didn't ask politely if it could step out. Nope, it just swung around like a drunk uncle on a wedding dance floor. The AMX was so eager to spin that owners quickly realized this was not a car you took lightly. It could humble even seasoned drivers. One second you're looking cool with your arm out the window, the next you're backwards in a cornfield wondering where your hubcaps went. But here's the thing. If you had the guts and the skill to tame it, the AMX 390 was a riot. It was fast, raw, loud, and felt like a go-kart with a rocket strapped to it. On a straightaway, it could hang with or even embarrass some of the big boys of the muscle car scene. And when people saw that AMX badge, most shrugged, until they got smoked at the next stoplight. Then they remembered real quick. Styling-wise, it had that no-nonsense late 60s muscle look, but more compact, more aggressive, like it was permanently flexing. And because AMC was the scrappy brand, you didn't see one on every corner. Owning an AMX 390 back in the day meant you weren't just driving another cookie-cutter Camaro. You were rolling in something unique, something that said, yeah, I'm different, and I might just put you in the rear view. Of course, AMC never had the deep pockets of GM or Ford, so cars like the AMX never got the glory they deserved. But to this day, muscle car purists know the 1969 AMC AMX 390 was the real deal. Dangerous? Absolutely. Unpredictable? Like a cat on bath salts. But thrilling? Brother, there wasn't much out there that gave you this kind of wild, white-knuckle ride. It was the ultimate underdog muscle car, the one that nobody took seriously until it was already too late and you were watching its taillights fade into the distance, assuming it didn't spin out first.
Number 8. The 1967 Shelby GT500. The car that looked like pure muscle royalty, sounded like thunder rolling through a canyon, and handled about as gracefully as a refrigerator on roller skates. Yeah, Carroll Shelby may have built a beast, but let's not kid ourselves. This thing was equal parts beauty queen and street brawler. So here's the story. By '67, Ford's Mustang was already a hit, but Carroll Shelby, the Texan hot rod genius who figured stock is boring, decided the Mustang needed steroids, a steak dinner, and maybe a shot of Texas whiskey. The GT500 wasn't just a Mustang with stripes, it was a monster, stuffed with a 428 cubic inch Police Interceptor V8, because apparently the 289 V8 in the GT350 wasn't wild enough. That's right, Shelby heard fast and thought, needs more boom. And boom it did. With around 355 horsepower, and really closer to 400 when tuned right, this bad boy pulled harder than your uncle trying to win a tractor pull. On a straight line? Oh, it was magic. The sound alone could rattle windows, scare small children, and make grown men grin like idiots. It was the kind of car that announced itself a block away with that deep, chest-thumping rumble. The GT500 didn't whisper, it yelled every time you touched the throttle. But here's the catch, and this is where the humor kicks in. The suspension. Let's just say primitive is being polite. Yeah, it had leaf springs in the back and handling dynamics that made every corner feel like a dare. Take a sharp turn too hot, and suddenly you weren't Shelby's hero. You were the evening news headline. Owners quickly figured out that while the GT500 was born to drag race, it wasn't exactly a ballerina in the twisties. More like a linebacker trying to do ballet in steel-toed boots. Still, let's not pretend this thing wasn't gorgeous. With that long hood, aggressive scoops, dual headlights, and those racing stripes, it had more presence than a rock star in leather pants. Pull up in a GT500 and everybody noticed. Even folks who didn't know jack about cars would stop and go, "Dang, what is that?" It was part muscle car, part showpiece, and 100% attitude. And the legend only grew from there. Remember, this is the same car that later Hollywood turned into a movie star, Eleanor in Gone in 60 Seconds. You know you've got a legend on your hands when Nicolas Cage is willing to risk life and limb just to drive you through a hail of bullets and explosions. Now, was it perfect? Heck no. The brakes were sketchy, the suspension was prehistoric, and the steering had all the precision of a dart-throwing contest after 3 beers. But you didn't buy a Shelby GT500 to be perfect. You bought it because you wanted to feel alive. You wanted to mash the throttle and hear that big block roar, even if the car scared the living daylights out of you at every bend in the road. The 1967 Shelby GT500 was Carroll Shelby's way of saying, "Sure, we could play nice, but wouldn't you rather unleash chaos?" And boy, did it deliver. It was raw, unfiltered American horsepower, the kind of car that made you feel like a hero in a straight line and a clown in the corners. But that's why we love it. It was big, brash, loud, and maybe even a little bit dumb, which in the world of classic muscle cars makes it absolutely perfect.
Number 7. The 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 LS6. If cars were prize fighters, this thing was Mike Tyson in his prime. No frills, no fancy footwork, just pure knockout power waiting to flatten anything dumb enough to step in the ring. On paper, Chevy rated it at 450 horsepower, which back then was like saying your buddy only drinks a six-pack. Translation, he's putting away at least 12. Because in reality, this big block monster was cranking closer to 500 ponies once you uncorked it. And torque? Forget about it. Over 500 pound-feet, enough to rip the rear tires into vapor before you even cleared the Dairy Queen parking lot. See, 1970 was the peak of the muscle car arms race. Dodge had the Hemis, Ford had the Boss 429, and Chevy rolled in like the kid on the playground saying, "Hold my root beer, watch this." So they dropped the 454 cubic inch LS6 V8 into the Chevelle SS, slapped a cowl induction hood on top, and basically told the rest of the industry, "Beat that, suckers." Now, driving one of these wasn't for the faint of heart. You didn't just cruise in an LS6 Chevelle. No, sir. You wrestled it, like a rodeo bull hopped up on steroids. Mashed the gas, and the rear end tried to meet the front end. The tires? They had zero chance. A burnout wasn't an accident in this car. It was a way of life. You wanted to leave a stoplight? Congratulations, you just fogged the whole intersection with Goodyear smoke. And handling? Let's just say if you were dumb enough to think this was a corner carver, you'd better have your chiropractor on speed dial. The Chevelle SS wasn't about taking corners. It was about demolishing straights. The quarter mile was its kingdom, and in stock trim, you were talking low 13s, high 12s if you knew how to drive. That was rocket ship fast for 1970, back when most family sedans were lucky to hit 60 before they shook themselves apart. But here's the funny part. Despite being one of the meanest machines ever to roll off a GM assembly line, the Chevelle looked kinda classy. Two-door coupe,
wide stance, and those twin racing stripes, it wasn't overly wild. It had just enough chrome to look respectable at Sunday church, and just enough attitude to look like it might steal your girlfriend at the Friday night drag strip. The kind of car dads loved, but moms didn't trust. Of course, with great power comes, well, let's be real, not always great responsibility. Plenty of LS6 Chevelles ended up in ditches, guardrails, or junkyards because back then, safety equipment meant hold on tight and hope you bounce. No airbags, no traction control, no nanny computers. Just you, a big block V8, and whether or not your guardian angel was on shift that night. And don't forget the sound. Lord have mercy, the sound. Fire up that 454, and it was like Thor himself smacking the pavement with his hammer. Deep, guttural, bone-rattling. The kind of noise that made the neighbor's dog howl, shook Grandma's dentures, and had cops reaching for their ticket books before you even left the driveway. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 wasn't just a car. It was a statement. It said, I don't care about gas mileage. I don't care about subtlety. I just care about being the baddest dude on the boulevard. And for one glorious year, before the insurance companies and government regulations came in swinging, it was the king. Even today, this Chevelle is a holy grail muscle car. Try finding one in good condition, and you'll need to fork over the kind of cash that makes Wall Street bankers sweat. But when you hear that LS6 fire up, worth every penny. So yeah, friends, the Chevelle SS LS6 wasn't just fast, it was scary fast. A car that separated the men from the boys, the drivers from the dreamers. And if you were dumb enough to underestimate it, well, the ditch had your name written all over it.
Number 6. The 1969 Pontiac GTO The Judge. Yeah, this wasn't just a car. This was Pontiac showing up to the party in a Hawaiian shirt, sunglasses at night, and a case of cheap beer saying, "Let's crank this thing up to 11." Now first off, the name. Why The Judge? Pontiac borrowed it straight from a popular comedy skit on TV's Laugh-In, where Sammy Davis Jr. would yell, "Here come the judge!" Pontiac thought, hey, why not? Let's slap that on our car. And buddy, when you rolled up in one of these, you weren't just driving a car. You were announcing yourself like a pro wrestler entering the ring. Under that long sculpted hood was Pontiac's 400 cubic inch Ram Air 3 V8, pumping out 366 horsepower. And if you were really nuts, you could upgrade to the Ram Air 4, which screamed its way up to about 370 horsepower. And honestly, closer to 400 once you did a little backyard tuning. That might not sound like Hellcat numbers today, but in '69, this was nitro in a lunchbox. The GTO already had a reputation for being the godfather of muscle cars, but the Judge? That was Pontiac saying, "Hold my beer, we're about to kick things up a notch." Bright colors like carousel red, big wild graphics, a spoiler slapped on the back for good measure, it was less about aerodynamics and more about flipping the bird to subtlety. Driving one? Oh boy. Safety tech back then was basically try not to die. No airbags, no ABS, no stability control. You had drum brakes that faded faster than your uncle's hairline, and seatbelts that most people didn't even bother to wear. Mash the gas and this thing launched like a bottle rocket on the 4th of July. Problem was, bottle rockets don't exactly steer well. Neither did the Judge. Cornering? Forget it. If you were dumb enough to throw it into a tight turn, you were either going to spin it out or plow into the nearest telephone pole. This was a straight-line missile, pure and simple. Quarter mile? High 13s, maybe even 12s if you had sticky tires and guts of steel. But you had to respect it. If you didn't, the Judge would. Well, let's just say a lot of them ended their careers upside down in a ditch. And the exhaust note? Pure American thunder. Fire it up and the neighbors' windows rattled, babies cried, and dads in sensible sedans shook their heads with envy.
That deep, lumpy V8 idle wasn't just noise. It was a warning. Move aside, civilian, the judge has arrived. Now, Pontiac marketed this thing right to the youth. Ads were loud, brash, in your face, and cheap compared to the more grown-up luxury coupes. Insurance companies, on the other hand, they hated it. Rates for the judge were so high, it was like paying rent on a second house. But kids didn't care. They wanted to be the king of Friday night street races, and the judge delivered, for as long as you could keep it on the road. The downside? Well, let's just say the judge wasn't exactly built with Volvo-level safety. Wrecks were common. Those big ol' steel dashboards didn't have airbags. They were the airbags. And with that much torque and so little traction, you could go from 0 to 0 in about 3 seconds flat. It wasn't called the judge because it played fair. It was called the judge because it sentenced fools to roadside wrecks. But here's the thing. Despite all its flaws, the 1969 GTO Judge became a legend. It represented everything that was outrageous and fun about the muscle car era. Bright paint, big motors, zero apologies. It was loud, brash, cocky. In other words, pure America on 4 wheels. Even today, when you see one at a car show, people stop, stare, and grin. Because the Judge wasn't just a car. It was a statement. It said, I'm young, I'm dumb, and I got a heavy right foot. And if you lived through driving one without wrapping it around a tree, buddy, you earned your stripes.
Number 5. The 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. This wasn't just a car. This was Mopar telling Chevy and Ford, y'all thought you had muscle? Hold my beer. First things first, the name. Just saying Hemi Cuda makes gearheads sit up straighter, like they just heard the national anthem. The Cuda, short for Barracuda, was Plymouth's entry into the pony car wars, and with the optional 426 Hemi under the hood, it became less of a car and more of a rolling middle finger to subtlety. That 7.0-liter elephant motor was rated at 425 horsepower from the factory. But here's the truth. Everyone and their cousin knows Chrysler lowballed that number. Real-world dynos had it closer to 470-500 horses. And torque? Let's just say it could twist telephone poles out of the ground. Now driving one of these beasts? Whew! You needed more than just a driver's license. You needed guts, reflexes, and a good life insurance policy. Tap the gas too hard and the rear tires lit up like the 4th of July. And traction? Forget it. On skinny bias ply tires, you could roast rubber all the way through first, second, and sometimes even third gear. Mopar fans used to joke, the Hemi Cuda doesn't accelerate, it just erases pavement. The Hemi Cuda was built for one thing, straight-line carnage. Sure, you could try to take a corner, but the steering was vague, the suspension was stiff, and the car was heavier than your uncle's Thanksgiving plate. If you weren't careful, you'd be facing the wrong way before you even knew what happened. But the sound, oh Lord. Fire up that dual-quad Hemi and it didn't just rumble, it shook the earth. Windows rattled, car alarms cried for mercy, and old ladies clutched their pearls. It was pure mechanical thunder, the kind of noise that makes your hair stand on end and your neighbors file noise complaints. The 70 Cuda came with aggressive styling, wide stance, shaker hood poking out like it was ready to inhale small children, and paint collars with names straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon. Plum Crazy, Lemon Twist, Vitamin C. You didn't just buy a car, you bought an attitude. Pull up to the local burger joint in a Hemi Cuda and suddenly every Camaro and Mustang driver got real quiet. Of course, owning one wasn't all rainbows and wheelies. Insurance companies hated this thing. They knew the second a 20-year-old hotshot bought a Hemi Cuda, that car wasn't going to survive long. Rates were through the roof, and a lot of buyers got scared off. Add to that a price tag that was no joke, and Plymouth didn't sell many. In fact, fewer than 700 Hemi Cudas were made in 1970.
That's why today they go for prices that'll make your wallet cry, and your wife say, "No, honey, we're not refinancing the house for a car." The Hemi Cuda wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It was Mopar's way of saying, we don't care if it's impractical, dangerous, or expensive. We're building the wildest thing we can. And in an era where muscle cars were getting faster and crazier by the day, the Hemi Cuda still stood out as the top dog. Now, a lot of folks who got behind the wheel of one didn't make it to tell the tale. This car had a bad habit of humbling cocky drivers. You think you're Steve McQueen? The Hemi Cuda will prove you're just Steve from down the block who can't keep it straight past 60. But for those who respected it, who treated it like the wild animal it was, there was nothing like it. Quarter-mile runs in the low 13s, sometimes dipping into the 12s with a little tuning. Back then, that was rocket ship speed. The 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda wasn't built for the faint of heart. It was built for the brave, the reckless, the gearheads who wanted to live life one burnout at a time. It didn't care about comfort, it didn't care about safety, and it sure as heck didn't care about gas mileage. It existed for one purpose: to scare the pants off anyone who dared line up next to it. Even today, when you see one, which is rare, it doesn't just sit quietly at a car show, it owns the space. People gather around, point, and whisper like they're standing in front of a wild animal at the zoo. Because they know, the Hemi Cuda isn't just another classic car. It's a legend, a road warrior, a fire-breathing reminder of when Detroit went absolutely off the rails, and we loved every second of it.
Number 4. The 1968 Dodge Charger RT 440 Magnum. Yeah, the same bad boy that stole the show in Bullitt and has been chasing cops, crooks, and muscle car dreams ever since. This thing didn't just roll off the assembly line, it rolled into American pop culture with a swagger big enough to make Elvis jealous. Now, on paper, the Charger RT with the 440 Magnum V8 was an absolute sledgehammer. We're talking 375 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. That's torque heavy enough to yank tree stumps, drag your buddy's broken-down pickup to the junkyard, and still have enough left over to roast the rear tires all the way down Main Street. The 440 wasn't subtle. It was Mopar saying, "You don't need no fancy Hemi, we'll give you a big block that'll twist your spine without even trying." Just because Hollywood made it look smooth doesn't mean real life was the same story. In Bullitt, you've got Steve McQueen in a Mustang and the Charger guys chasing him through San Francisco like ballet dancers with carburetors. In reality, that Charger was a torque-heavy handful. You so much as breathed on the throttle and the back end said, "See you later, boss," and started fishtailing like a cat on a waxed floor. And let's not forget, this beast was huge. At nearly 18 feet long, you didn't just park a Charger, you docked it, like a cruise ship at a pier. Try parallel parking one downtown, and you'd end up owing the city 3 street signs and a mailbox. But man, the looks made up for it. The hidden headlights, the Coke bottle curves, that wide-mouthed grille, it looked like it was smiling before it bit your head off. Manual steering felt like arm wrestling a gorilla. Brakes? Let's just say adequate if you planned ahead. And handling? Handling was point it straight and pray. The suspension was about as sophisticated as a lawn chair. And with all that torque on tap, corners weren't your friend. Charger drivers didn't carve canyons, they attacked straight lines and avoided curves like the plague. But that's not what made the Charger cool. No, sir. What made it cool was the attitude. Fire up that 440 Magnum and the whole neighborhood knew about it. It didn't purr, it didn't hum, it roared like a lion with a hangover. You'd feel the rumble in your chest before you even dropped it in gear. And the chicks? Let's be honest, you pulled up in a 68 Charger and suddenly everybody wanted a ride, even if they knew you might scare the daylights out of them. And Hollywood didn't miss a beat.
Bullets sealed its legend, but then came the Dukes of Hazzard with the General Lee. The Charger became less a car and more a TV star. But don't let the glitz fool ya. Out on real roads, in the hands of an average Joe, that torque monster could humble you real quick. The Charger demanded respect. Treat it wrong, and it'll slap you around like a schoolyard bully. Insurance companies knew it too. They jacked up premiums higher than Willie Nelson on tour. Gas mileage? Forget it. That 440 drank fuel like it was going out of style, which, thanks to the looming 70s gas crunch, it kinda was. But nobody cared. You didn't buy a Charger RT for practicality. You bought it to make a statement. I've got power, I've got style, and I'm not afraid to melt these tires in front of the Dairy Queen. Even today, when one rolls up at a car meet, it doesn't just blend in. It steals the spotlight. Doesn't matter if it's sitting next to Ferraris, Lambos, or modern Hellcats, the 68 Charger RT has an aura. It whispers, "Yeah, I'm old school. Yeah, I'll beat you in a straight line. And yeah, I look way cooler than your plastic spaceship." The 1968 Dodge Charger RT 440 Magnum wasn't just a car. It was a heavyweight champ, raw, unfiltered, and a little dangerous. It was the muscle car that combined Hollywood cool with real-world brawn. And sure, it could be a torque-heavy handful, but that's the beauty of it. It didn't want to be tamed. It wanted to be respected. And if you gave it that, brother, you had one of the baddest rides in American history.
Number 3. The 1971 Ford Mustang Mach 1 429 Super Cobra Jet. This wasn't just a Mustang. This was a bar fight on wheels, a V8 beast that came into the world loud, mean, and a little too much for its own good. Now, let's set the stage. By '71, the Mustang had gone from being the lightweight, zippy youth car of 1964 to a full-blown linebacker in shoulder pads. Bigger body, wider stance, and under that mile-long hood sat the heart of a beast, the 429 Super Cobra Jet V8. Ford rated it at 370 horsepower, but let's be real. Detroit was downplaying numbers at the time like a teenager fibbing about their homework. In reality, this thing was putting out enough grunt to scare your insurance guy into early retirement. This wasn't your average grocery getter Mustang. Nope, this was the drag pack car. That meant beefed-up internals, better cooling, and rear gears so aggressive that highway cruising felt like you were late for the apocalypse. Mash the gas, and the Mach 1 didn't just accelerate, it launched, like it was trying to break free from Earth's gravity. You didn't drive this car, you just tried to hang on while it went about its business. Here's the kicker though. All that go, but not nearly enough whoa. The brakes on the '71 Mach 1 were basically a polite suggestion to slow down. They were like, hey buddy, maybe think about easing off a little. Meanwhile, the car was still hurtling forward like a runaway freight train. And the tires? Forget it. They were skinny little bias-ply balloons trying to handle an earthquake. Grip was more of a theory than a reality. Stomp the throttle too hard and you were instantly sideways, white-knuckling the steering wheel while praying to every saint in the book. But that was part of the thrill. Driving the 429 Super Cobra Jet was like riding a bull. Dangerous, unpredictable, but man, what a rush. This wasn't a car for posers or casual Sunday drivers. This was a machine that demanded respect. Treat it right, and you felt like the king of the road. Treat it wrong, and it'd spin you around faster than your prom date after too many wine coolers. Oh, buddy, the '71 Mach 1 looked like a muscle car dressed for a heavyweight title fight. Long nose, fastback roofline, NACA hood scoops ready to swallow small birds, it was pure aggression with chrome trim. Park one in front of the diner, and every kid with a Camaro or GTO suddenly found an excuse to go home early. The Mach 1 didn't just show up, it intimidated the parking lot. Now, let's be real.
The '71 Super Cobra Jet came out at the worst possible time. Insurance companies were cracking down on muscle cars, emissions regs were tightening, and the gas crisis was lurking just around the corner. It was like Ford had built a heavyweight fighter just as the referee was stepping into the ring to call the match. Sales never took off, and the SCJ became a rare sight. Too wild for the masses, too raw for the new era of sensible cars. But today, oh man, finding one of these is like stumbling across buried treasure. Collectors drool over them because they represent the last stand of the truly unhinged muscle era. No turbos, no traction control, no computer nannies. Just a mountain of Detroit iron and a driver crazy enough to try and tame it. The 1971 Ford Mustang Mach 1 429 Super Cobra Jet was a glorious contradiction. A car that could outrun just about anything in a straight line, but scared the life out of you when it came time to stop or turn. It was big, brash, and a little bit dangerous. But that's what made it legendary. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, it was pure, unfiltered muscle, a mechanical daredevil with a blue oval on the grille. And if you ever get the keys to one, do yourself a favor. Respect it, grip the wheel tight, and remember, you're not driving it, you're just negotiating with it.
Number 2. The 1969 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. The pocket rocket of the muscle car world. Now don't let that 302 cubic inch number fool you. This wasn't some underfed grocery getter. No sir. This engine was like a caffeinated squirrel on Red Bull. High revving, screaming to nearly 7,000 RPM, and begging you to stomp on the skinny pedal just one more time. Chevy built the Z28 for Trans Am racing, which meant it was lean, mean, and ready to tango at high speeds. It had a lightweight body, close ratio 4-speed, disc brakes, and suspension tuned for corners. Sounds civilized, right? Wrong. Put a teenager or a weekend warrior behind the wheel, and suddenly you had a recipe for twisted metal and insurance adjusters working overtime. This wasn't a car for Sunday drivers. This was a car that said, "Buckle up, Buttercup, and pray you don't see a tree." The Z28 was deceptive too. From the outside, it didn't scream killer. No giant scoops, no cartoonish Hemi badge, just clean lines, stripes, and that menacing stance. But once you fired up that high-compression V8, the whole neighborhood knew it wasn't a librarian's ride. It snarled, popped, and shook like it had too much moonshine in its veins. While other muscle cars would roast you with torque off the line, the Z28 wanted to dance. This thing thrived when you wound it up, banging through gears like you were late to the drag strip. Problem is, back in the day, young bucks treated every back road like Daytona. And with those skinny bias-ply tires, handling was more roller skate on gravel than precision machine. Let's just say, more than a few Z28s ended their days wrapped around telephone poles. And yet, despite its reputation as a handful, the Z28 became a legend. It wasn't just speed, it was style, agility, and that underdog swagger. Ford had the Boss 302, Mopar had their fire breathers, but the Camaro Z28 carved its own lane in the muscle car arms race. Today, if you spot one at a car show, you'll see grown men drooling like kids at a candy store, remembering when this Chevy was the baddest kid on the block. So yeah, the 1969 Camaro was fast, furious, and dangerous in the wrong hands. But isn't that the whole point of muscle cars? They weren't built to be safe. They were built to be fun. The kind of fun that made your mom yell and your dad smile. And if you survived owning one, well, you've got the stories and probably the scars to prove it. Number 1. The 1970 Dodge Challenger RT with the legendary 426 Hemi. Yeah, you heard me right, the elephant motor. Big cubes, big horsepower, and a whole lot of ways to find yourself in the ditch faster than you can say, "Hold my beer." Now, on paper, this thing was the stuff of dreams.
A long, wide-bodied Challenger dressed in stripes, hood scoops, and an attitude so bad it made other cars cross the street when it rumbled by. And under that shaker hood, the 426 Hemi, rated at 425 horsepower, but every old-timer will tell you that was Mopar being humble. Truth is, this beast was putting down closer to 500 horses if you gave it some love. That's not just fast, that's rip your toupee off and send it into orbit fast. But here's the problem, and it's a big one. In 1970, traction control was just a driver's right foot and maybe a prayer. No computers, no electronic babysitters, no fancy tires. You stomped on that gas pedal, and suddenly the rear tires were screaming like a banshee on prom night. Half the time, you weren't accelerating, you were just turning perfectly good rubber into smoke clouds big enough to get a call from the fire department. And if you did hook up, well, then you were hanging on to the steering wheel like a cowboy on a rodeo bull, hoping you didn't end up sideways across 3 lanes. And let's not forget the brakes. The Challenger RT came with power, but stopping power? Not so much. You could launch yourself to 100 miles per hour faster than you could say yee-haw, but slowing back down was more of a suggestion than a guarantee. It was kind of like trying to stop a freight train with a garden hose. Good luck, buddy. But man, the presence of this car. Roll up to a light in a Challenger Hemi RT, and you were instantly king of the boulevard. Camaros, intimidated. Mustangs, nervous. GTOs, suddenly second-guessing their life choices. This wasn't just a car. This was a 4-wheeled middle finger to everything slow, boring, or sensible. Of course, a lot of young bucks in the 70s thought they were Mario Andretti the second they got behind the wheel. Spoiler alert, they weren't. The Challenger Hemi was a widowmaker in the wrong hands. More than a few of these ended up wrapped around poles or sitting in junkyards way too early. But that's what happens when you give a lion to somebody who thinks it's a house cat. Today, the 1970 Challenger RT Hemi is pure Mopar royalty. You see one at an auction, and the crowd loses its collective mind. Prices shoot into the stratosphere, and some guy in a Hawaiian shirt bids his kid's inheritance just to take it home. And honestly, worth it. Because cars like this weren't built to be practical. They were built to scare you, thrill you, and make every drive feel like the last lap of a NASCAR race. So yeah, folks, the 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 426 Hemi wasn't just a car. It was a statement. It said, "You only live once, but if you drive me, once might be enough."